Okay, let's summarise very briefly. Data about people is very significant. It's very, very important to virtually every organisation. The General Data Protection Regulation is implemented 25th of May 2018. It isn't all about regulation. In fact, it's not about regulation at all. Regulation is about how we should behave. It is all about making sure that we engage effectively with our target customer, our end user. So that the outcome that we get in 2 or 3 years' time is people who get what they want, but at the same time we've got lower cost, a simplified architecture, less risk, more control, better governance, and people who understand how it all works. So there's certain do's and don'ts. Now, one of the most immediate and important don'ts is do not take GDPR to be a tick in the box regulation where you can go through all 99 articles and say, oh, to do that I have to do that, to do that one I have to do that. GDPR is much more about an overall set of behaviour and an overall enhancement of culture and practice about how your organisation should work. So the other thing you don't want to do is go and start a whole series of independent projects. Things need to be more coordinated, so don't just fire stuff off, spend time planning. Don't assume that your current mindsets are what you need to take you through the next 2 or 3 years. Your current mindsets are what delivered the complex set of systems and architectural complexity that is currently evident in an awful lot of large organisations. So there may need to be some rethinking about how you go about approaching the enhancement of managing data about people within your own organisation. And now is a good time to think through that, because you will have to be putting budgets in place for 2017 and beyond to make sure that you make the appropriate changes. So the do's, there's a lot of do's. The do's, firstly, see GDPR for what it is, and that is a set of guidelines for good management of data about people. Now, the key thing to realise is that the thing that is going to get you over the line in terms of completion and delivery of what you need to do is your people. So there's a whole series of bottom-up activities that you need to do in terms of communicating and training, or just initially just communication and awareness of the fact that this big change is coming, and that it is all about making sure that we as a company respect the data that we are holding on behalf of people who engage with us, that we will hold it in safe custody, and that we will provide evidence, big word in GDPR, evidence, that we will provide evidence at all levels that we have done that. So both in terms of evidence of the controls, evidence of security around the data sets, evidence of we've got sensible data flows and that we're rationalising those to simplify them, evidence that senior managers are named accountable for specific bits of data, so that we demonstrate, we have the evidence to show it's under control. We know where it is, we know what it is, it's there, and that person is responsible for it. So we need to make sure that we embed respect for and protection of personal data baked in to the culture and values of the company. We obviously need to make sure that we have all the processes in place to make sure that we respond to people's rights, rights for access, right for portability, right for rectification. So we need to have processes and upgrades to our systems to make sure that that's the place. If the regulator has a complaint and they need to come in and see how you're looking after that data, we need all the sort of governance, lineage, data flow diagrams to explain to them, this is where the data came in, here's how we captured the consent, here's how we then transferred it into the system, there's controls over that, here's how we made sure that we've copied the consent so we understand what's being used, so that we have a full end-to-end flow and an understanding of how we are handling somebody's data. We've got things like the right to be forgotten that we have to think through, which of course means that there are certain bits of it that have to be forgotten, but there are certain bits which for statutory purposes we will still need to maintain. So that's quite an architectural challenge as to how we implement some of these things, where there's a lot of subtleties to do with the implementation. So we have to make sure that we have breach incident management. So if unfortunately there is a breach, that we are in a position to notify people so we minimise the risks to them, and in the event that things did go to law, then we've shown the courts, or we've shown whoever, that we've done everything we possibly can to minimise that risk, and that, with all the evidence, will make significant differences in terms of the allocation of any fines or penalties or sanctions or for example, cease and desist, stop holding that data. So there's all sorts of things that can happen, so we need to make sure we're very well managed. And most of that needs to happen, or a lot of that needs to happen, at the cultural level. We need to make sure that people understand what's going on. We need to make sure that we have systems and escalation processes in place, so if somebody knows there is a problem about data, that they can actually report it and make sure that it gets escalated and reported to some governance committee, so that it can get resolved, and if there is any particular dubious data, that it can get remediated. One of the things we really do have to do is develop capability. If we were totally capable, we wouldn't have the challenges that we have with the architectural systems, the diversity of data, the proliferation of data. We wouldn't have those problems. So we have those problems because we still have some way to go in terms of developing good architectural design, good data design for how we're going to manage data about people. So that's something that we need to think through, so that when we do go through and complete our final stages of GDPR compliance, that we have made significant enhancements to our capability. From a top down, clearly we need to upgrade our information security records management policies. We need to make sure our code of conduct is enhanced to cater for the new regulations. For those organisations who suffered in the financial crash of 2007 and 2008, there have been huge investments in governance and risk management, and those investments really can pay off in terms of what we do about GDPR, because GDPR's got specific provisions in there for wanting to know about data flow, which in other senses we would call data lineage. So there is an awful lot in there that reinforces the need for good quality data governance, and if you already have governance processes in place, then we need to connect the governance people with the privacy people to make sure that there is a good overlap and an understanding of the existing governance capabilities, methods, controls, data quality management capabilities that have been put in place, because they may be 100% suitable, and if they're not, then GDPR gives some additional emphasis in terms of making sure that your governance is up to scratch. Ownership and accountability, this is very much a top-down thing, and this is an insistence of GDPR that there are named people accountable for specific sets of data, personal data. Data ownership has been a major challenge. It continues to be a challenge for most organisations. That is something that we really have to think through in terms of exactly what ownership model we adopt within our governance structure, and make sure that we roll that out, not just for bits of personal data, but that there is a consistent ownership model that is rolled out across the organisation for all classes of data. We do need to make sure that we have an inventory of that data, that we have clear definitions, and that we have aliases where it's used in different places, and that we know we have good record of the inventory of where that is used, and that we have a good, strong architectural vision for what our 2-year, 3-year outcome actually looks like. So those are a combination of do's and don'ts, and as you can see on the do side, there's an awful lot of things to do. So you really do need to build up your agenda for data management, for privacy. That's an absolutely crucial thing.